My son leaned close to his dying mother and said, "The church needs your money more than we do, Mom." Think about God's work. That was the moment I knew greed had stolen my own son. I am James, 82 years old, a veteran of the Korean War. I built this brick house with my own hands 50 years ago, and in it, I lived with my wife Margaret, the strongest woman I ever knew. They say steel is unbreakable, but Margaret was steel wrapped in diamond. Nothing could shatter her, or so I thought. Last March, she fell on the stairs and never walked again. 6 months later, she was gone. But in those months, as her body failed, our youngest son, David, showed a betrayal I will never forgive. I threw him out of this house while his mother lay dying upstairs. And then I learned Margaret had been holding a secret of her own, a plan bigger than revenge, a plan that would change everything we thought we knew about family. We had 3 children. Michael, our oldest, became a lawyer out in California. Sarah, our daughter, ran a shop but struggled to keep it alive. And David, our youngest, married Lisa, a woman who liked sparkle more than truth. Then there was Samuel, my old war brother turned pastor, who had been forced into retirement for standing up against the church. If you've ever felt betrayed by family over money, you need to hear this story. What my wife did will make you rethink inheritance, loyalty, and the true meaning of love. I remember sitting beside Margaret in the dim light of our bedroom. She was pale, her breath shallow, her body broken from the accident months earlier. David stood at the foot of her bed, his eyes darting between me and Lisa. He leaned close, too close, and spoke those words that cut me deeper than any wound I had carried back from Korea. The church needs it more than we do. It was not just a sentence. It was a knife twisted with greed. I felt the blood in my face burn hot. My son was not talking about faith. He was not thinking about God's work. He was thinking about bills, about debts, about the easy way out. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled, but she did not speak. She just looked at me, and in that look I saw a plea to protect her, to guard what we had built, to stand for what was right when our own son could not. I stood up from the chair, my hands shaking. I wanted to grab him by the collar and drag him out, but Margaret's fragile hand clung to mine. She was too weak to stop him herself, but she was strong enough to remind me of who we were. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen long after everyone else had gone. The refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked louder than usual, and the house felt emptier than it ever had. I thought about the years we had worked. Margaret teaching at Sunday school, me taking shifts at the plant, the 2 of us saving every dollar. We did not have much, but what we had was honest. And now I was supposed to let it slip into the hands of people who saw family not as blood and love, but as a wallet. Michael called from California. He could not be here in person yet, but his voice was steady. He told me, "Dad, don't let them pressure Mom. I will help handle the legal side. I just need you to hold strong." I believed him. Out of all my children, he was the one I could still count on. Sarah had been distant. She visited less and less, her mind tangled up with the problems of her store. She called sometimes, her tone clipped her words. "Quick. Dad, I will come by next week. Things are tough right now." Next week turned into next month, and eventually silence. Ethan, her boy, was different. He was only 25, still in medical school, but he came by with wildflowers he had picked from the field down the road. He sat by Margaret's side and read to her, his voice soft and calm. I saw in him the compassion that seemed to have skipped a generation. And then there was Samuel. He came often, his Bible worn, his steps slower than they used to be, but his eyes clear. He prayed with us, but more than that, he listened. He listened to Margaret when she spoke about fears she could not share with anyone else. He listened when I confessed I felt like I was losing my family to something darker than death. I thought Margaret was too weak to fight back. She could barely lift a glass of water without trembling. Yet behind my back, she was already working with Michael and Samuel on something much bigger. What I did not know then was that Margaret had already begun to shape a plan, a quiet act of defiance that would outlive her, a plan that would turn every greedy whisper into a thunderclap of justice. And that, my friend, is where the real story begins. The last Christmas before everything cracked open still lives in my senses. I can smell the bird roasting the sweet butter and rosemary that Margaret brushed over the skin every 30 minutes. I can hear the creak of the oven door and the soft tick of our old kitchen timer. I can feel the heat rolling out into the hallway and the faint chill coming in from the porch because our grandkids kept opening the front door to check if it was snowing. It never snows much in our part of Tennessee, but hope makes fools and children out of the best of us. Margaret ran the house like a conductor. She moved from the stove to the sink to the dining room with a grace that made chores seem like a dance. She tied that red apron behind her back and hummed something from an old hymn. Her laugh drifted down the hallway when she caught me stealing a piece of crust from the pecan pie. She tapped my hand, then let me keep it. That was Margaret, firm but kind, and always watching out of the corner of her eye. Ethan arrived first, guitar case in one hand, a little poinsettia in the other. He was 20 and skinny in that way young men are before life fills out their shoulders. He set the plant by the window and tuned his guitar near the tree. When he strummed the first clean chord, I felt the house settle. The notes ran across the hardwood and into the kitchen, where Margaret smiled without looking up. He started picking an old folk song, the kind my father used to whistle, and I stood behind him and kept quiet so he could finish. Sarah came in next, carrying too many shopping bags for someone whose store was in trouble. She hugged Margaret, then checked her phone, then hugged me, then checked her phone again. Her smile looked good from across the room, but when the light caught her face, I saw the tired lines by her mouth. She kissed Ethan's head and told him to play something festive. He switched to Silent Night. The living room softened. Even the old clock on the mantel seemed to tick a little slower. David and Lisa pulled up late the way they had started doing ever since they bought a newer car they could not really afford. The headlights flashed through the curtains, and then they came in with a cold breeze and a lot of noise. David was full of stories about a big project at work. Lisa laughed a little too hard. She hugged Margaret with one arm and kept her phone in the other. It buzzed in her palm, and she glanced down at it. The blue light washed her face. I saw a flash of a crown icon and the word bonus before she turned it away. I did not think much of it then. I just thought young people and their screens, always chasing something that steals the minutes right out of their lives. Samuel came last, careful on the steps, a plate of cornbread balanced in both hands. When I opened the door, the cold air turned white in front of his mouth. He smiled the same gentle smile he wore when we were boys, before we knew what the world could take. I took the plate and pulled him into a hug. His coat smelled like old books and cedar. He looked thinner than the last time I saw him, but his eyes were clear. He touched the brim of his cap to Margaret and said, "Good to see you, sister." She touched his elbow and told him he was late to the feast. He said good food waits for a good reason. We ate like families do when they still believe time is a long road. The table squeaked when we leaned on it. The turkey skin cracked under the knife. There was gravy and mashed potatoes and green beans with bacon. Sarah talked about a vendor who was late on a shipment. David talked about a boss who did not appreciate him. Ethan asked Samuel about old stories from our service days. Lisa laughed and reached for her phone every few minutes. The blue light kept pulsing across her nails. Once, when she thought no one was looking, her thumb hovered over an app with chips stacked in a neat pile. She tapped, smiled at something, then tucked the phone under the table. After dinner, Ethan played by the tree while Margaret stacked plates. He shifted into amazing grace without being asked. We all fell quiet. Samuel watched him with a kind of fatherly pride, then cleared his throat. He asked if he could say a word. He stood with his hands folded, and looked at us in that slow pastoral way of his. He said the church had changed since we were young. He said some of the change was good, and some was the kind that looks like progress, but smells like money. He said he had been asked to step down years back when he stood up for a black deacon who wanted to lead a community program. He did not name names, and he did not complain. He just told the truth the way a man does when he has made peace with it. He said he found comfort working with a small group that helped folks with disabilities. He said faith is a light that travels best when it is carried in a calloused hand. The room felt smaller after he spoke. Sarah looked at her lap. David stared at a point past the tree. Lisa smiled politely and checked her phone again. Margaret placed a dish towel on the counter and stayed very still. I knew her well enough to see when something had taken root behind her calm face. She thanked Samuel for the cornbread and for the story. He nodded and sat. Later, when the kitchen was almost clean, I found Margaret by the sink. The window over it looked out to the backyard, the oak standing black against the winter sky. She took my hand and dried it with the towel. Her fingers were warm and strong. She asked if I remembered when we first met Samuel. I told her I did. We were boys in uniforms, more scared than we wanted to admit. She said he was still that boy under all those years. I said he was. She was quiet for a long breath, then she said, "Jim, Lisa looks troubled. I worry about David." I told her they would figure it out. I said young couples always carry too much. I said money has a way of making a mess of good people, but it can settle down. Margaret looked back at the window and nodded, but the way her jaw set told me she did not believe me. I heard Ethan in the living room teaching a carol to the younger kids. His voice rose and fell like a gentle tide. I carried the trash out to the bin, and the night air bit my cheeks. When I came back in, Samuel was putting on his coat. He thanked Margaret again and used the back door. I walked him to the porch. The boards gave a tired groan under our weight. He told me he hated bringing heavy talk into a holiday, but some truths come on their own schedule. He looked toward the road and said the church he served had become a business. He said he never thought he would be told to keep his head down on matters of basic decency. I told him he did right by that deacon. He gripped my shoulder. He said Margaret had a strong heart for the ones left behind. He said she paid attention. Then he climbed down the steps and waved. Inside, Sarah was trying to make a cheerful plan out loud. She talked about a New Year sale and how a good January could fix a bad December. David nodded and poured himself another drink. He made a joke about blessings. Lisa sat on the edge of the sofa with her legs crossed and the phone cupped in both hands. The blue light flickered again. Ethan started a new song. Margaret stood in the doorway to the hall watching them as if she could measure the future in the way they sat and spoke. When the kids left, the house settled into that heavy quiet you only hear after company. Margaret and I moved through the rooms, setting things to rights. She folded the tablecloth and smoothed the creases. I rinsed the roasting pan and left it to soak. The tree lights clicked softly as the little bulbs warmed and cooled. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and gave up. In our bedroom, she brushed her hair until it lay flat across her shoulders. She sat on the edge of the bed and tapped the brush against her knee. She asked if I had noticed the way Lisa clutched her phone. I said I had, and that it was not my business what a grown woman did with her free time. She did not answer for a minute. Then she said, "There are kinds of light that shine to guide a person home, and there are kinds that shine to lure a person off the road." I turned out the lamp and slid beside her. She lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. I could tell sleep would not come easy. I told her again that our kids would find their footing. She turned her head and studied me. There was a question in her eyes, or maybe a decision. I reached for her hand. She squeezed and then let go. Christmas ended the way Christmas often ends. Dishes drying on towels, a last cup of tea, a prayer whispered under the covers, Life, ordinary and precious. In the morning, I fixed pancakes, and we ate them at the counter like newlyweds. The winter sun tried to push through the clouds and failed. In the weeks that followed, the signs kept coming small at first. Sarah's calls grew tighter, shorter, and full of numbers that did not add up. David came by less then, not at all. And when he did, he brought talk of opportunity that felt thin. Lisa posted pictures of fancy desserts on her social pages, even when David mentioned their budget. None of it shouted. It just formed a line that led somewhere I did not want to think about. Margaret noticed all of it. She wrote small notes on sticky paper and tucked them into the pages of her cookbooks. She would close a book and place her palm on it like a seal. One evening, she stood by the window with the blinds tilted to show the oak. Her reflection looked like a younger version of herself in the dark glass. She said, "Jim, Lisa looks troubled. I worry about David." I said, "They will figure it out, honey." She nodded and let the blinds fall back into place. Margaret looked at me with a strange light in her eyes, as if she were holding a secret I was not ready to hear. I did not know that only a few months later, that secret would smash our family to pieces. It was March when the stairs took my wife from her legs. The day had started simple. I cracked eggs into a bowl. She measured out coffee like she always did. The house smelled like toast and orange marmalade. The oak outside the kitchen window was still bare, each limb black against a pale sky. Margaret said she wanted her cardigan from the guest room upstairs. I told her I would get it. She smiled and said she needed the exercise. I wiped my hands on a towel and turned toward the sink. I heard one foot on the first step, then another. Then the sound I will hear until my last breath, a slip, a short cry, a heavy thud. Silence. I ran. She lay twisted on the landing, eyes wide, breath trapped in her chest. I knelt and touched her arm. She tried to move and could not. I called her name. She whispered mine. I told her not to move. My fingers could not find my phone at first. I dialed and shouted our address. The operator kept me talking until the siren found the driveway. I held Margaret's hand. Her fingers were cold and strong at the same time. She said she could not feel her legs. She said it in a calm voice, as if describing the weather. The paramedics were quick and kind. They strapped her to a board, carried her careful as a newborn, and slid her into the ambulance. I rode in the front seat, hands clenched so tight on my knees I left half moons there. I watched the lights bounce over the hood and across mailboxes and stop signs, and the face of a boy on a bicycle who turned to look. At the hospital, the doors opened, and the air smelled like bleach and plastic. They took her through double doors, and I followed until a nurse stopped me with a gentle hand. The waiting room television was on some midday talk show. The sound was off. A balloon floated on a string near the nurse's station. A man in a seed cap slept with his mouth open. The clock on the wall refused to move. When the doctor came, I could tell before he spoke. His face had that trained calm professionals wear when they must change a life with a sentence. He sat me down. He said there was damage to the spine. He said words like T12 and L1. He said paralysis from the waist down. He said they would manage pain, teach us what to expect, help us adapt. He spoke of the future as if it were a set of instructions. I nodded, because men like me nod when there is nothing else to do. They let me see her. The room was bright in a way that hurt. The machines hummed in gentle patterns. Margaret looked small, but unbroken. When she saw me, she reached for my hand. I kissed her forehead. She told me not to cry, and I told her I was not. She smiled at the lie. The nurse adjusted the blanket and asked about our children. I said I would call them now. I called Michael first. He answered on the second ring. He had that lawyer voice on, steady and clean. When I told him, he went quiet for a beat. He said he would handle whatever paperwork the hospital needed. He asked for the names of doctors, for the case manager, for the exact wording of the diagnosis. I read from the wristband and the whiteboard on the wall. He said he would book a flight as soon as he could. He told me to stay with Mom and not to sign anything until he reviewed it. His confidence steadied my hands. I called Sarah next. She picked up in a rush and talked over my first sentence. When she heard the words hospital and accident, she went silent. She said her store was in the middle of inventory and that her assistant had quit. She said she would come next week. She said it twice, as if saying it would make it true. I told her to do what she could. She said she loved her mother and hung up quickly. I called David. His phone went to voicemail the first time. On the second try, he answered breathless, like he had been running. I told him what happened. He said he had a big deadline at work. He said he would swing by tomorrow or the day after. I told him his mother was in a hospital bed. He said he knew and he was sorry, and he would be there next week. I stared at the phone after he hung up. The screen went dark and showed me my own frown. Ethan did not wait to be asked. He walked through the hospital door by mid-afternoon with a mason jar full of wildflowers, purple clover, Queen Anne's lace, yellow buttercups. He set them on the window ledge where the light could find them. He washed his hands at the sink and then pulled a chair beside his grandmother. He told her about his classes. He told her the joke his roommate had made about a professor's bow tie. He asked her about the Bible verse she used to make him memorize on Sunday nights. She closed her eyes and recited it slow, and Ethan said every word with her like a call and response. When the nurse came with medication, he stepped back and thanked her by name. When the case manager came with forms, he asked questions I did not think to ask. He took notes on a small pad where he usually drew guitar chords. Night fell in layers. The parking lot lights came on and smeared yellow on the glass. The machines kept time. A volunteer brought me a blanket I did not use. The doctor returned to review the plan. He spoke carefully about a rehab facility. He said we would learn about transfers and pressure sores and the chair she would need. He spoke like a man who had said the same speech 100 times. He also said there was a chance for strength to return in the upper legs. He did not promise. He left the hope there like a small coin on a table where anyone could take it. Margaret drifted in and out. When she woke, she watched me. Every time she looked, I straightened. At one point, she asked me to sit closer. I did. She told me not to sell the house. She told me the oak tree made her feel safe. I promised we would stay. She asked for water. I lifted the cup to her lips. She apologized for needing help. I told her I would carry the whole sky if she asked. Michael called again that night. He had already spoken to the hospital and had a list of questions for me. He asked about insurance and a primary care referral. He said he would be on a red eye and arrive before noon the next day. I told him Ethan was here, and that helped a great deal. He said to tell Ethan he was proud of him. Sarah texted a heart and a prayer. She added that January and February had been brutal at the shop and that she was staying late to close the books. David texted next week for sure, Dad. Do not worry. He added a thumbs up. I put the phone face down. The next morning, Samuel showed up with coffee from the diner. He brought the kind of cup that burns your hand unless you hold it at the rim. He set it on the tray and took Margaret's other hand. He prayed without big words. He thanked God for skilled nurses and for breath in the lungs and for a marriage that still had tenderness in it. Margaret squeezed his fingers and said amen so softly I almost missed it. Samuel's eyes shone. He said he would stop by the house to feed the cat and pick up her cardigan. Days folded into each other. There were beeps and checks and small victories. The first time Margaret could sit up in bed for 10 minutes, the first time she could stand between the parallel bars while the therapist watched her knees, the first time she laughed at a joke I made about hospital pudding. I learned how to help with the braces and the transfers. My back learned a new language. I did not complain. Each small win felt like a medal pinned on a weary coat. Michael arrived with a briefcase and a tired smile. He shook hands with every nurse. He asked smart questions about equipment and home modifications. He set up a call with insurance and did not raise his voice when the person on the other end read from a script. He stayed 2 nights in a hotel and then flew back to sign something with a judge. He promised to return with a plan for follow-up care. He delivered calm and in a hospital that is the rarest medicine. Sarah sent a card with a picture of a lighthouse on the front. She wrote that storms pass. She apologized for the delay and said next week again. David called once and talked about meetings. He apologized and made a quiet comment about how expensive medical care had become. He asked about our finances in a way that made my stomach harden. I told him we were fine. When Margaret was moved to a rehab floor, the room felt less like a battlefield and more like a classroom. Each day had a schedule: morning exercises, lunch, afternoon sessions, visitors during the last hour before dinner. Ethan came as often as classes allowed. He brought fresh flowers and new songs. He kept a folder of paperwork and a neat list of timelines, the kind of thing you do when you are trying to turn fear into order. One evening after a hard session, Margaret lay with her eyes closed. The television murmured in the background. I sat and watched the soft rise of her chest. She opened her eyes and found me. She said my name. I leaned in. She whispered, "Jim, call Michael. I need to update my will tonight." I asked if she was sure. She nodded. Her voice steadied. She said she wanted it on record and done proper. She said she loved all our children, but she could not pretend she had not seen what she had seen. She did not list complaints. She did not speak in anger. She spoke like a person who has weighed the scales and found them fixed in place. I called Michael. He answered on the first ring. He said he could arrange a video conference with proper witnesses and a notary. He promised to coordinate with the hospital staff. He told me to rest and let him handle the details. They set it up the next afternoon in a small family room down the hall. A hospital administrator explained the process. A notary verified identity. There were witnesses on the screen. I stood by the door with my hands in my pockets. Margaret spoke clearly. She asked to review one section again. Michael guided her voice, patient and strong. When it was done, the notary sealed the document. Margaret closed her eyes as if a weight had been set down. After that, something changed in her. She let the therapists push harder. She ate more. She laughed once at a joke the young aide made about hospital socks. She still tired easily, but her spirit held a steady light. I kept the room quiet and cool. I learned how she liked her pillows. I asked the nurse for an extra blanket for her feet. We built a new routine out of broken pieces. She spoke with Michael in secret 3 times. I was not allowed to listen. And Samuel was always there. I found the notebook by accident. It was tucked behind a stack of old hymnals in the bottom drawer of Margaret's dresser. I was looking for her shawl, the blue one she always wanted, when the nights turned cool, when my hand brushed against a stiff corner of leather. I pulled it out and saw her handwriting on the first page. The cover smelled faintly of lavender and dust. My chest tightened as I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it. The first entry was dated 10 years back. Every line was neat, the numbers written with the same careful loops she used when balancing our checkbook. $500, then $1,000, then more. Each page carried a note in the margin: Black Charity, help for wheelchairs, supplies for families, scholarships for disabled youth. Page after page, year after year. By the last entry, the total stood just shy of $500,000. My hand shook as I traced the ink. $500,000 given quietly without a word to me. I closed the book and stared at the dresser mirror. My reflection looked older, harder, as if the truth had added years in an instant. I thought of all the times I had asked about our savings, and she had smiled and said not to worry. I thought of the dinners where she cut back portions for herself. I thought of the little vacations. We never took the new roof we put off for another season, the way she wore her coats until the sleeves thinned. She had been pouring our life into something I did not even know existed. I carried the notebook to the porch and sat with it under the light. The crickets sang in the yard. The oak tree stood black against the moon. I opened to the middle and read her notes. One line caught me. Samuel showed me true charity. My hands stilled. Of course, Samuel. He had been part of this from the start. I drove to his house the next morning. The gravel crunched under my tires. His porch light was on, though the sun was already climbing. He opened the door with a mug in his hand and a look that told me he knew why I had come. I held up the notebook. He nodded and stepped aside. Inside the place smelled of old wood and coffee. Bookshelves leaned under the weight of worn Bibles and hymnals. We sat at his kitchen table. I laid the notebook between us. He sighed and rested his palm on it. He said Margaret had come to him the week after he was forced out of the church. She had told him she could not stand the way they treated him, the way they turned their backs on the deacon he defended. She told him she wanted to do something that mattered, something clean. He introduced her to Black Charity, a group that helped disabled folks no matter their color or background. She took to it like it was her second family. I asked why she kept it from me. Samuel looked at me the way he did when we were boys, crouched in the dirt overseas, steady and unflinching. He said she knew I would worry about money, that I would try to stop her, not because I was against giving, but because I was always counting the costs. He said she wanted to carry this alone, her way of fighting for justice. I rubbed my forehead and felt a hollow ache settle in my chest. She had been stronger than I ever knew, strong enough to keep a secret this heavy for a decade. Samuel poured more coffee and told me Black Charity had changed lives. New ramps built for schools, job training for veterans who had lost limbs, medical equipment delivered to families who could not afford it. He said Margaret's money had kept lights on when donations were low. He said she never wanted recognition, only results. I sat there listening, torn between pride and hurt. She had done something noble, but she had shut me out of it. That night, I went through the notebook again. In the back pocket, I found folded emails she had printed. One caught my eye, dated 6 months earlier. It was from Pastor Williams at Big White Church. The words were slick, polite, polished, like a salesman's pitch. Mrs. Smith, please consider leaving a legacy to the church. Your gift could expand our ministry and honor your faith. My jaw tightened. I turned the page and found her reply. Her words were short and sharp. Never. I know what you did to Samuel. I could almost hear her voice when I read it. Firm, cold, final. I stared at that reply until my eyes blurred. She had stood her ground against them without hesitation. I felt a swell of pride so fierce it nearly broke me. She had not only protected Samuel's dignity, she had refused to let our family's legacy be swallowed by greed. And she had done it all quietly with no fanfare, while the rest of us stumbled through our busy lives. The next day I sat by her bed in the rehab wing. She was tired, her eyes heavy, but she smiled when I held her hand. I wanted to ask her why she kept it all from me. I wanted to tell her I had found the notebook. But I looked at her fragile frame and decided silence was the kinder choice. Instead, I kissed her knuckles and told her she was remarkable. She looked at me with those knowing eyes, and I think she understood what I had not said. For a few days, I carried the secret alone. It weighed on me every hour. When I mowed the yard, I thought about every dollar she had slipped away. When I balanced our small account, I wondered how she had managed the rest. When I lay awake at night, listening to her breathe beside me, I realized I did not need every answer. I just needed to honor what she had chosen. David had no idea. None of them did. He still walked around believing there was money waiting, that inheritance was his by right. He did not know his mother had already refused the church and their smooth-talking pastor. He did not know she had already secured her legacy elsewhere. And his next move, when it came, forced me to do the hardest thing a father can do. I had to throw my own son out of my house. The knock on the door came just after lunch. Margaret had barely finished her soup. her hands still trembling from the effort of lifting the spoon when the sound echoed through the hallway. I thought it was Ethan maybe bringing another bunch of wildflowers or one of his school books to show his grandmother. When I opened the door, I saw David standing there with Lisa at his side, and behind them, tall and polished in a dark suit, stood Pastor Williams. The pastor smiled, that wide, practiced smile that never reached his eyes. David held his Bible in one hand, like he had just come from service, though I knew he had not stepped inside a church in months. Lisa clutched her purse, her knuckles white around the strap. My stomach sank. Dad, David said we came to pray with Mom. Pastor Williams wanted to bless her? I hesitated, then stepped aside, because Margaret always welcomed visitors, no matter who they were. They walked into the living room where she sat propped in her chair, a blanket over her legs. Her eyes widened when she saw the pastor. She tried to lift herself straighter, but the effort made her shoulders shake. Mrs. Smith-Williams said, lowering his voice into a tone meant to sound holy. I heard of your struggle. The church has kept you in our prayers. I believe God has a purpose, even in pain. Margaret gave a polite nod, but I could see the tension in her jaw. David moved closer and set his hand on the arm of her chair. Mom, he said softly, Pastor Williams has a vision, a new disability center right here in town, a place to serve those who suffer. Your gift could build it in God's name. Lisa chimed in, her voice sugary but thin. It would mean so much, Margaret. Think of the legacy. The whole community would remember your name. Margaret's lip quivered. She looked from David to Williams, then to me. I saw the panic in her eyes. I stepped forward, but Williams raised his hand as if to calm the room. Please, Mr. Smith, he said, let her consider it. It is a chance to do eternal good. David leaned in, lowering his voice. But I heard every word. Mom, the church needs it more than we do. You know it is the right thing. Margaret shook her head. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She whispered, Please, leave me alone. That was it. I felt heat rise from my chest to my face. My hand clenched into a fist. I stepped between them and my wife. Get out, I said. Williams tried to speak again. I cut him off. My voice rose louder than I had spoken in years. I said, Get out of my house. Lisa, you've been a toxic daughter-in-law from the start, twisting every burden into betrayal. And David, you let it happen. How dare you pressure a dying woman in her own home? How dare you use God's name to steal from your own family? David's face twisted, half shame, half anger. Dad, you do not understand. This is bigger than us. I took a step toward him. He backed away, glancing at Lisa. She tugged at his sleeve. The pastor cleared his throat and muttered something about blessings. They turned together toward the door. As David stepped onto the porch, he looked back. You are making a mistake. We need this. What do you mean we need this? I demanded. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting to Lisa, then away. Nothing. Forget it. He hurried down the steps. I slammed the door behind them. The sound rattled the windows. Margaret was crying now, soft sobs muffled into her blanket. I went to her side and held her hand. She pressed her forehead against mine. Jim, she whispered, promise me you will protect what we built. I promise, I said. My throat ached with the weight of it. The house felt poisoned after they left. The air was heavy like smoke that clung to the curtains. I paced the kitchen, fists still tight. The pastor's words rang in my ears. Your gift could build it in God's name. A lie wrapped in scripture. That evening, I tried to read to Margaret, but she closed the book with a weak hand. Her eyes glistened in the lamplight. Jim, she whispered, call Michael. It is time. I nodded, though my chest clenched at the thought. I knew what she meant. She was ready to make her final decisions that would tear through the family like a storm. I kissed her hand and promised I would call. She closed her eyes, and her breathing slowed. I sat beside her long into the night, watching the rise and fall of her chest. What I did not know then was that Ethan had already begun his own quiet work. While I was focused on protecting Margaret from what I could see, he had started gathering proof of what lay in the shadows. And that proof would shake the entire family to its core. Ethan asked me to meet him on the back porch one evening just as the sky was fading into that deep blue before night takes hold. The cicadas were singing, and the oak tree cast long shadows over the yard. He looked nervous, clutching his phone and a manila envelope. I knew that look. It was the same one his mother used to wear when she had something heavy to say, but was not sure how it would land. "Grandpa," he said, his voice steady but low, "I need to show you something. It is going to hurt, but you need to know." He handed me the phone first. He pressed play. I heard voices muffled at first, then sharp as glass. It was Sarah's voice, brittle with panic. "I just need $500,000 just to keep the shop alive. If she gives it, I can fix everything. I swear it." Then came David, his tone desperate, almost whining. "You think you are the only one with problems? I am drowning here. Bills, credit cards, loans. Next week I will get straight, but I need something now. If Mom does not help, I do not know what I will do." And then Lisa. Her voice was different, cold, calculated. "I have 200 grand in gambling debt, and if it comes out, I am done. But I have leverage. Williams cannot afford to let me go under. He owes me, and he knows it. She will listen if we push her the right way." The recording ended with the scrape of a chair and silence. My hands trembled as I held the phone. My stomach turned. These were my children, my family, speaking like scavengers, circling a body not yet cold. Ethan opened the envelope next. Inside were photographs. Clear shots of Lisa slipping in and out of the Marriott downtown. Different days, different clothes, always with the same hurried glance over her shoulder. In one picture, Williams himself trailed a few steps behind her, his collar turned up, his face hidden but undeniable. I felt bile rise in my throat. I wanted to deny it, to claim it was doctored, but the dates and times printed in the corner told the truth. Ethan spread the photos across the table like cards in a bad hand. "There is more," he said quietly. He opened a folder on his phone and showed me screenshots of text messages. "Lisa to Williams. Usual room tonight. Same place, same time. Bring what we talked about." I could hardly breathe. The betrayal was complete, painted in pixels and ink. My son's wife tangled with the very man who had stood in my living room and dared to pressure Margaret on her deathbed. I gripped the arm of the chair until the wood groaned. Ethan put his hand on mine. "I recorded it all legally, Grandpa. Tennessee is one-party consent. I checked. I made sure this would hold if it ever had to. I could not sit back and watch them tear her apart." For a long while, I could not speak. I stared at the boy, this young man who had grown up in my house playing guitar under the oak tree. He had seen what the others could not or would not. He had acted quietly, carefully, with a steadiness that reminded me of Margaret herself. Finally, I said, "You did right, Ethan. You did what I could not." He nodded, but his eyes glistened. "I just wanted her to have peace, Grandpa. She deserved better." Later that night, I sat by Margaret's bed. She was weaker now, her breath shallow, her skin pale as linen. The lamp cast a soft glow over her face. I held her hand and told her I loved her. She looked at me with eyes that still carried fire even as her body failed. "Jim," she whispered, "Michael has everything. Trust the plan." I did not know the full plan then. I only knew she had set something in motion, and Michael was the one holding the pieces. Her words gave me both comfort and dread. Comfort because she trusted me enough to let go. Dread because I knew a storm was coming and I would be the one standing in the middle of it. She closed her eyes and drifted into sleep. I sat there until the first gray light of morning slid through the blinds. My hand never left hers. 3 days later came the funeral. I had my own plan, quiet and deliberate, to protect her legacy. But Margaret's will sealed and waiting in Michael's hands was the real bomb. And when it dropped, none of us would ever be the same. The church was full the morning of Margaret's funeral. The air carried the smell of lilies and polished wood, heavy and clean, in a way that pressed on the chest. Sunlight fell through the stained glass, painting the pews in blue and red. People filed in quietly, coats brushing against each other, whispers fading under the weight of the organ's slow hymn. I stood near the front, my hand resting on the pew, staring at the simple oak casket draped with white cloth. My heart pounded, steady but hollow. The pastor from the small community chapel welcomed everyone. He was not from Big White Church. He was a younger man, kind and modest, and Margaret had asked months ago that he be the one to speak if the day came. He read from the Psalms. His voice filled the space with the sound of shelter and mourning. Then he stepped aside and said the microphone was open for anyone who wished to share a memory. A neighbor stood first, an older woman who lived across the street. She talked about how Margaret brought her soup when her husband passed. Her voice broke, and she pressed a tissue to her face. A man from Black Charity came next. He wore a simple suit and carried a folder. He spoke about Margaret's quiet generosity, how she had funded ramps for 3 schools and sent 12 kids with disabilities to college. He said she never asked for recognition. He said her name would live on in the people who walked freely because of her kindness. I watched David shift in his seat when those words filled the church. Then David rose. He adjusted his tie, walked with confidence to the pulpit, and looked out over the crowd. His voice carried loud, practiced. My mother loved this community. She loved this church. She always said faith was the foundation of family. I am sure she remembered that even in her last days. Sarah nodded in the front row, her eyes shining, as if she agreed. Later, when the crowd thinned, Sarah grabbed my arm and whispered, her voice cracking, "Dad, you don't understand. If the shop closes, everyone will know I failed. I cannot live with that shame." Her eyes were wet, but her words carried more desperation than love. Lisa leaned close to her husband and whispered, "After this we are set." I heard it. Even through the low hum of the fans and the shifting of people in the pews, I heard her words. They were sharp, smug, like the edge of glass. David went on painting a picture of Margaret as a devoted follower of Big White Church, as if the last decade of her giving to Black Charity had never happened. He spoke about legacy and service, but his words rang hollow against the truth I carried in my pocket. I gripped the notebook she had left behind, my thumb pressed against the worn cover. My jaw tightened. When David finished, a few polite claps rose from the pews. He smiled, proud of himself, and stepped down. The next moment cracked the air like a pebble against glass. A neighbor from 2 streets over, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried, leaned toward Lisa as they crossed in the aisle. She said, "Funny. I saw you at the Marriott last week." Lisa froze. Her body stiffened. Her smile collapsed. She stammered something about a luncheon, but the color drained from her face. David grabbed her elbow and pulled her forward quickly. A ripple went through the people nearby. Whispers followed, soft but sharp. I saw Michael watching from the side aisle, his eyes narrowing, as if every word confirmed what he already knew. The service moved on. More stories came. Some were light-hearted, about Margaret's way of correcting a choir out of tune or her habit of sending handwritten notes on birthdays. Others were heavy about her visits to hospital rooms and her fierce defense of those left behind. The open mic closed with a prayer. The young pastor's voice wove blessing and farewell together, and the organ lifted the hymn one last time. We walked behind the casket, out into the sun. The sky was clear, almost too bright. The cemetery was a mile down the road, and the cars rolled, slow headlights cutting the morning light. At the graveside, words were spoken again, short and tender. Dirt hit the top of the casket like soft drums. People hugged, shook hands, pressed tissues to their faces. David stood tall, greeting mourners like a man receiving congratulations. Sarah lingered close to him, nodding at every word. Lisa kept her sunglasses on her lips tight, her hand clenched around her phone. The neighbor who had spoken to her earlier walked past again. Lisa turned her head quickly, pretending to cough. I felt the heat of anger under my grief. They believed they had shaped the story, that the room had swallowed David's speech whole. They thought Margaret's silence was theirs to fill. But they were wrong. I saw Michael near the back, speaking with the lawyer who had handled the hospital documents. His face was calm, his shoulders squared. When he caught my eye, he gave a small nod. He reached into his coat pocket, and I glimpsed 2 envelopes white against the dark fabric. One marked for family, the other, heavier, sealed with red. They thought they had it all figured out. But in Michael's hands were 2 envelopes, one for the family and one for the truth. The conference room smelled of leather and old paper. Heavy blinds muted the daylight, leaving the table bathed in a dull glow from the ceiling lights. The air was too still. Michael sat at the head of the table with 2 envelopes placed carefully in front of him. I sat beside him, my hands folded tight, while David and Sarah took chairs across from us. Lisa hovered near the corner, sunglasses perched on her head even indoors. Ethan sat quietly, shoulders straight, eyes locked on the table. The lawyer, a gray-haired man with wire frames, cleared his throat. "This is the official reading of Margaret Smith's last will and testament," he said. His voice echoed in the small room, each word sharp. "It has been verified and witnessed according to state law." A silence followed, thick enough to choke on. Michael opened the first envelope and unfolded the document. His voice carried steady, every word clipped and formal. "To my son David, I leave the sum of $100. The room went still. David blinked, confused, his mouth half open. "To my daughter Sarah, I leave the sum of $100. Sarah jerked upright, her voice cracking. "What? That cannot be right. Read it again." Michael did not pause. "To my daughter-in-law Lisa, I leave nothing." Lisa's sunglasses slipped from her hair to the table with a clatter. Her face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Michael's tone softened as he continued. "To my grandson Ethan, I leave $500,000 to be used for his education and for the establishment of a scholarship fund in his name." Ethan's eyes widened. His lips parted, but he said nothing. He simply sat straighter, his throat working as if to swallow a stone. Michael drew a breath. His final words filled the room like thunder. "The remainder of my estate, including savings investments and the sum from my life insurance, I leave to Black charity to continue the work I valued above all else. Estimated value $5 million. The lawyer paused, then added Mrs. Smith had carried a life insurance policy from the factory where she worked for 30 years. Combined with her savings and investments, the amount reached this figure. She knew exactly what she was leaving behind. The words landed like blows. David's face drained white, then flushed red. His chair scraped the floor as he shot up. "This is a joke. This is fraud. She would never." Sarah slammed her palm on the table. "We are her children. She cannot just give it all away. This is not legal." The lawyer leaned forward, unshaken. "It is entirely legal. In fact, small sums to each heir are common practice to prevent contest." Mrs. Smith knew exactly what she was doing. David's hands shook. She was manipulated. By you, by Michael, by that charity. His voice cracked on the last word. Lisa finally found her voice sharp and bitter. "We will fight this. I know people. We will expose all of this." Michael waited until the room fell into a ragged silence. Then he slid the second envelope across the table. He looked at me first, then at Ethan, then at the others. "Before you make another threat," he said evenly, "there is something you should see." The lawyer opened a laptop and connected it to a small screen at the end of the table. The image flickered, then steadied. The room showed the dim hallway of the Marriott downtown. A date stamp glowed in the corner. The camera captured Lisa stepping out of an elevator, looking both ways before walking briskly down the hall. Another frame showed her entering a room with Williams close behind his collar high, his hand brushing her back. Sarah gasped. David's head whipped toward Lisa. She froze, her face stiff as stone. "That is not me," she whispered, though her voice lacked any weight. The footage shifted to another day, another hour. Again, Lisa, again, the same hallway. Again, the same room number. The manager's voice came faint through the speakers, explaining the source. Multiple visits, same room, consistent over several months. David's hand slammed the table. "Tell me this is fake, Lisa? Tell me." Her lips trembled. She clutched her purse tight, but no answer came. The silence spoke louder than anything she could say. Ethan sat motionless, his eyes lowered. His knuckles whitened where he gripped the chair. I looked at him and saw the weight he carried, the truth he had unearthed, now laid bare in front of everyone. Sarah broke the silence with a scream. "You ruined us. You ruined everything." Her voice echoed off the walls, wild and sharp. Michael closed the laptop with a click that cut through the chaos. He leaned back, his eyes steady. "Our mother's will is clear, and the evidence speaks for itself. This matter is settled." David paced, his breathing harsh. Lisa sat frozen, her face pale, her eyes glassy. Sarah trembled, muttering curses under her breath. The lawyer gathered his papers calmly, as though this storm was no different from the dozens he had seen in that same room. I sat there, my chest heavy but steady. Margaret had done it. She had cut through their greed, their lies, and left behind a legacy of truth. The storm raged across the table, but in my heart there was a strange peace. Michael reached into his coat again. His hand returned with a third envelope sealed in red. He set it gently on the table. His voice was calm but firm. "Mom asked me to read this only if necessary. And after what just happened, it is necessary." Michael broke the seal on the red envelope and unfolded a single page. His hands were steady, but I could see the tightness in his jaw. He cleared his throat and began to read in that clean lawyer voice of his, but the words were Margaret's through and through. "If my children, David or Sarah, or any person acting for them contests, this will in any court," he read, "then attached materials may be released in full to the local press, the district attorney, and Black Charities legal counsel. These materials include recordings, written statements, and corroborating exhibits. I do this not out of spite, but to protect the truth." Michael glanced up, met each face, then continued. "To my children, know this. I loved you from the day you were born. But love is not silence. Love is not a blank check. Love is not pretending that neglect is devotion." He turned the page, and there was a paperclip holding a small stack of items. He lifted one at a time. The first was a flash drive labeled with the date. The second was a notarized summary of Ethan's recording signed by a hospital witness who had been present for the will signing. The third was a short letter in Margaret's hand, the ink a little shaky, but the message strong. Michael read the letter aloud. "I was awake. I was present. I chose freely. I saw who stood with me in the long nights and who looked away. If this causes you pain, let it be the pain that brings you to the truth." He set the letter down. No one spoke. The room held its breath. The lawyer slid the flash drive into a small player. Ethan gave a small nod. The speakers filled with the same voices I had heard on the porch. Sarah asking for $500,000. David begging for relief. Lisa speaking of leverage and debt. The words crawled along the table and wrapped around us like smoke. When the audio ended, only the hum of the air vent remained. David stared at the wood grain in front of him, lips pressed into a hard line. Sarah's hand shook where it rested on her purse. Lisa kept her eyes on the floor. Michael capped the flash drive and slipped it back into the envelope. Mom left one more sentence. He said, "If you accept her wishes, you will have my forgiveness. If you fight them, you will meet the truth in public." David opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Lisa, then at Sarah, then at me. For a moment, I saw the little boy in overalls who used to sit on my shoulders to watch the 4th of July parade. Then it was gone. He pushed his chair back and stood. "I am done," he said, but the words did not carry the power he wanted. He walked out. Lisa followed quick steps, head down. Sarah lingered, eyes glassy, then left without a word. The lawyer exhaled quietly and gathered his papers. Michael leaned toward me. "It is over," he said. "If they want war, they will lose it. If they accept, we can all try to heal." I squeezed his shoulder. We walked Ethan to the door. He hugged me longer than usual, his cheek against my temple. "You did right," I told him. He shook his head. "Grandma did." At first the town did not believe it. Some neighbors defended Pastor Williams and said the footage must be fake, that Margaret had been misled. But whispers grew, and when the video finally leaked online, they had no choice. Within days, everyone was talking from porches to checkout lines. A local blogger ran the story on a community site with comments turned off because tempers were too high. A few days later, I went to the grocery store for milk and felt eyes follow me down the aisle. Some faces were kind, some were sharp, and every look reminded me how far gossip could travel. I kept my head up and nodded to folks I had known 50 years, pretending it did not cut as deep as it did. By the end of the month, a quiet board meeting at Big White Church grew loud behind closed doors. People wanted answers. Money had gone missing before. Questions had been shelved before. The video from the Marriott moved those questions to the front row. The board voted to place Williams on leave. A week later, he was out. A statement went up on their website about accountability and prayer. It did not mention Margaret. It did not have to. Sarah tried to keep her store open. A sign that once read "New Arrivals" started to look tired in the window. She called once to ask if I would consider a loan. My throat tightened. I told her I would pay for groceries if she needed them. I would pay for heat, I would pay for medicine, but I would not undo her mother's last wish. She hung up with a small thank you that sounded like a door closing. March brought hard rain. David filed for divorce. It made the paper in 3 lines. Lisa settled with 2 credit card companies and then filed personal bankruptcy. She moved in with a cousin out of county. People said she kept her head down, that she stopped wearing sunglasses inside. The first warm days of June showed up, and I trimmed the hedges out front. Sarah shut the shop that month. She left a note on the door that said, "Thank you for your years of support." The space sat empty for a while. She took a job at a big retail store by the highway. I saw her there once from the end of an aisle. She was helping an older woman find a size. She spotted me, and we both hesitated. She lifted a hand. I lifted mine back. Later, I bought light bulbs I did not need and left them on her porch with a note that said, "I am still your father." She did not call, but she texted a simple thank you that night. Through it all, I kept the routines that steadied me. I made coffee at 6. I walked the path behind the high school where Margaret and I used to watch the football lights on Fridays. I sat under the oak and listened to wind in the leaves. I talked to my wife at the kitchen table like she was in the next room. I read the book of Psalms aloud some evenings and let the words float around the quiet house until they settled. Ethan came by often. Sometimes he stayed for dinner, sometimes just long enough to mow the yard without being asked. One evening he stood in the doorway with a look that told me he had rehearsed his words. "Grandpa," he said, "I am going to use the $500,000 for school and for a scholarship fund. I want other kids, especially those caring for family, to have help. But I am also moving in here if you will have me. You showed me what family means." My throat closed up. I nodded because speaking would break me open. He carried his guitar inside and set it against the wall like he had when he was 10. That night he played in the living room, and the house sounded like itself again. July brought heat and a sudden bloom of good news. The new center at Black Charity broke ground on a lot they had been trying to buy for years. They named the main hall after Margaret, not with a big plaque, but with a small brass plate near the door. I ran my fingers over the letters and felt the cool metal and a warmth in my chest. The director told me about a program for wheelchair fittings and a room where kids could learn to navigate the world. I told him she would have liked that. Michael took on 2 cases pro bono for families who had been pushed around by paperwork and policy. I watched him in court one morning. He stood straight as a pine and spoke like a man who had found a calling inside the one he already had. After we ate sandwiches on the tailgate of his rental car and laughed about how his tie never seemed to wrinkle, in quieter moments guilt drifted in like fog. I asked myself if I could have done more for David and Sarah when they were small, if a different father could have bent their paths. Samuel sat with me on the porch one night and listened without interrupting. He said, "A father lays a foundation and gives a door. Children choose whether to walk through it." He said Margaret had loved them without lying to them, and that is the hardest love. By late summer, the town moved on in the way towns do. New gossip arrived. New troubles took the front pew. I did not miss the old ones. I kept mowing. Ethan kept playing. We visited Margaret's resting place on Sundays after church and left fresh flowers from the yard. As fall cooled the air, a small packet came from a reporter in the city. He had been digging into church finances across the region. He asked if I would be willing to talk. I did not answer right away. I took the packet to the oak tree and read every page. Numbers told a story that looked a lot like ours, spread out over years and counties. The reporter included his card and a line that said, "I believe your wife saw something the rest of us are only now learning to name." 1 year later, on a bright morning that felt like a beginning, I walked through the finished black charity center with Ethan. Laughter echoed down the hall from a therapy room. A young man rolled past with a new chair and a smile that could light a storm. The director stopped us by the brass plate with Margaret's name and told me they had already fitted 50 chairs and trained 20 people for jobs. He said the waiting list was shorter by the week. I placed my palm on her name and thanked God for stubborn wives. We left and drove to the cemetery. The sky was clean. The grass lay flat and green around the stone. Ethan set a single rose in the holder and rested his hand on the top of the marker. We stood without speaking for a long time. When we did speak, it was simple. "She did it," he said. "She did," I answered. We turned to leave. My phone buzzed. It was Michael. His voice was quick, excited, heavy in a different way. He said a federal inquiry had opened after a series of reports. He said several churches across the state were under review. He said Big White Church was on the list. He said they were asking questions that sounded like the ones Margaret had asked in her heart a decade ago. I looked back at the stone. The air felt newly charged, like the stillness that comes before rain. 1 year later, Margaret's will had not only changed our family, it had exposed a truth far bigger than us. 1 year later, I stood in front of a building with glass walls that caught the sun and threw it back in every direction. The sign above the entrance read, "Black Charity Community Center." People streamed in and out through automatic doors. A boy in a new wheelchair raced his sister to the curb while his mother laughed and called after him. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and warm coffee. Voices filled the halls, not whispers, but laughter, greetings, the sound of life being rebuilt. Ethan walked beside me, tall now, steady, in the way only young men who have carried too much too early can be. He pointed out the therapy wing, the classrooms, the job training rooms already full of volunteers. The director shook my hand and said they had fitted 100 chairs in their first 6 months. He said Margaret's scholarship fund had already sent 5 kids to college, each one with a story of loss, but also of hope. As we walked through the main hall, a woman stopped me. She was small, with silver hair and kind eyes. She touched my sleeve and said, "Your wife saved my life. The ramp she funded let me come back to work after my accident. Without her, I would still be shut in my house." Her voice broke, and she squeezed my hand. I could not answer. I just nodded, and she understood. Later, Ethan drove us to the cemetery. The grass was trimmed neat, the sky a clear autumn blue. We carried fresh flowers and set them in the holder by the stone. The wind stirred, and I could almost hear her voice in the rustle of the oak branches nearby. We stood there for a while, in silence, heads bowed. Then Ethan spoke. "She would have liked this," he said. "She would," I answered. "She liked quiet victories. She liked justice that spoke for itself." We turned to leave, and as we walked back toward the truck, a man from town caught up with us. He had a limp and a cane, but his face glowed with pride. "Mr. Smith," he said, "I just wanted to thank you. That center is changing lives. My daughter has therapy there 3 times a week. She comes home smiling again." He tipped his cap and walked on. Ethan and I stood watching him go, neither of us speaking for a long moment. Back at the house, I sat at the kitchen table where Margaret used to balance the checkbook. The evening news was on the anchor's voice, calm but sharp. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Federal Probe Expands into Big White Church Network." The report told of families across the state pressured into wills and donations, promises made and broken. Numbers flashed on the screen, millions unaccounted for. William's name appeared in print tied to words like fraud and conspiracy. I turned the sound down low, but the words hung in the room all the same. Ethan came in with 2 mugs of coffee. He set one in front of me and said Grandma was right. She saw it before anyone else dared to say it. He sat down and leaned back in his chair. His eyes were tired, but his mouth curved into a small, steady smile. I looked out the window at the oak tree standing tall against the fading light. For a long time I thought about all we had lost. Then I thought about what had been built in its place. Not just a building or a scholarship, but a truth that outlived the lies. Margaret knew love is not money. Love is presence. Love is being there when it counts, not when it is convenient. Her will was not revenge. Some call it karma. I call it justice. And justice, once spoken, does not fade. It roots itself in the ground like that oak tree and stands through every season. I took a sip of the coffee and let the warmth settle in my chest. Then I looked straight at Ethan, who had given up his youth to fight beside me, and I said, "We will be all right. She left us more than enough." If Margaret's story reminded you that justice comes in quiet ways, let it stay with you. And now, if this story touched you, subscribe now. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and comment your own story. I read every single one.